She made the same distant face she makes when she reads earnestly. It was almost hypnotic. As soon as I pulled away, Yuri's expression returned. I... She was at an utter loss for words. Anxiety rose to a peak in my throat as I waited for her to continue. Her face became quite tranquil, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I love you too," she said, alleviating my anxiety. I couldn't even speak, so I just smiled. I held her hand and led her back to the clubroom. I wondered if we should take the rest of the day off. Would that be right? Could I convince Monica to let Yuri and I go without explanation? I didn't even notice that I was holding Yuri's hand when we entered the club. "Why are you holding hands?" Natsuki asked. I was speechless, but I let my hand fall to my side. There was a moment of silence. 1, 2. "Because we want to," Yuri said, taking my hand again. She spoke too politely to consider that a snap, yet slightly rude to consider that a calm response. I didn't know how to respond. Would it be better to let actions speak louder than words? "Hey, Monica, we reading the same poems as before, or doing something different?" I asked. She recovered from her surprise and nodded. "Same thing," she answered. Yuri and I took seats and let time pass for a moment in which the other 3 girls didn't stop staring curiously. A moment in which Sayori opened the door and greeted people in. The event passed as it did last time, with the only difference being the crowd. I honestly didn't care about that. The event ended, and before I could think a dismembered thought of what I could do next, Yuri was at my side. "Did you want to go back to the roof?" I asked. She smiled. "I'd like that," she said dreamily. "Do you think you could just hold on?" I asked. Yuri tilted her head a little and nodded, smiling sadly. "Okay," she said. I smiled and left, unsure of what to say. I wanted to look for someone. I had questions. I looked, and it only took me 5 minutes to find her fluttering red scarf. I tapped her shoulder. She moaned softly beneath her scarf. "We need to talk, Libitina," I told her. A few people stared, mouths agape. I knew Libitina only by reputation. Was she worth being so afraid of? She tilted her head a little. "Okay," she said, though I couldn't tell if she was asking a question. I expected to be doing this to her, but she grabbed my wrist and led me to a secluded spot. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed a barely noticeable, thin red blood stain on the floor. This is where I caught Yuri. I couldn't even finish the thought in my head. "Was there something you needed?" Libitina asked. "I know you know. Drop the fucking act," I said. I was angry. Libitina sighed sadly. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "How did you figure it out?" I demanded. She exhaled her frustration. "I've always known," she said at last. My brow furrowed. "What?" I snarled. "I've been doing my research on the literature club since Monica proposed the idea, since Sayori first showed interest, since Natsuki demanded to join, and since Yuri was coaxed there just as you were. And of course, I knew when you joined. I was already considering the literature club," she stated. "I don't understand," I said. She took a deep breath and began to explain. "You may not have noticed, Sayori being your only friend and all, that we had the same elementary school and middle school together," she said. "How do you know?" I asked. "I ask around and look at homeowners' records," she said casually. I didn't understand what that meant, and I was afraid to ask. "In asking around, I had many decent perspectives on you and the club members," she informed. This was actually beginning to scare me. She began to walk away, but before leaving, she said one final thing. "If I were you, I would be afraid for, or perhaps of, the entire volatile club." Those words frightened and chilled me to the very core. I was so stunned I forgot to stop her. Yet Libitina gave me a powerful example of why people were afraid of her. I shambled to the roof and texted Yuri. Has Libitina been stalking us, or is she just exceptionally clever? The entire day passed like a dream. Yuri and I had a nice conversation. We did the event one final time. I walked around aimlessly at the event. I noticed that Natsuki was only buying food from the event stands. Sayori seemed nervous and withdrawn all by herself. Monica seemed frustrated as she wandered. We all gathered in the clubroom again at the last hour or so of the day. We were all tired and ready to go home, but we needed to pack up our supplies. It was a wordless occurrence, with the exception of us politely taking our leave of each other. Sayori and I walked to the school entrance, as we usually did upon leaving the school grounds. Yuri was waiting for us. As usual, she didn't really initiate the conversation, but this time she seemed pleased by it. "Hey Yuri, want to walk with us?" I asked. I was very sure to say us. I recalled Sayori asking if I would ever replace her with Yuri, and I wouldn't. Okay, she said, after a moment's hesitation. "Yay! I think we live out in the same way regardless," Sayori cheered. "Well, as long as I'm not imposing," Yuri decided. Honestly, having Yuri at my side was enough to keep me happy. Then it happened. "Are you both together now?" Sayori asked. Yuri and I stopped in our tracks. We knew this was coming, but we weren't sure how to explain it. I looked at Yuri's expression, and that was it. "I guess we are, yes," I said, both of us picking up our pace finally. Yuri smiled to herself behind me. Sayori looked back, smiling. "I thought so. Why didn't you say anything earlier?" she asked. I was silent for a moment. We didn't quite know yet," I said, looking back to Yuri for confirmation. "That's right. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. It's hard to process," Yuri supported. We stopped in front of Sayori's house. She turned and threw her arms around me and Yuri. I felt her tears wet my shoulder. "I told you that you could become close with the club," she said, her voice breaking. "Looks like I win." "I'll try and help you with Monica and Natsuki, okay?" she said. I blushed red. Yuri and I both hugged Sayori back. We stood there, entangled together for a few minutes. It felt like too short a time before Sayori pulled back. "I'll be fine," she said, sniffling and wiping tears from her eyes. She turned and stared momentarily at the sunset that turned the sky a beautiful shade of orange, and the mountain cast a shadow over our entire city. "I'm going to get some sleep, then I'll be fine. Sayori paused, searching for an explanation. "Emotionally drained," she finished, after a thoughtful pause. Yuri and I began to chuckle. "I think that applies to all of us," Yuri admitted. We chuckled a moment longer before Sayori bid us good night and entered her home. "My home was just next door," I said, my strangely painful goodbyes to Yuri, and made my way towards the door. "Are your parents not home?" Yuri inquired. I noticed her eyes passing desperately between me and the driveway. It'd be a damn lie if I tried to deny my mind was on the same page as hers. "No," I answered, coyly. She began to tremble so badly that I noticed almost a yard away. "Would you like to come in?" I offered. "Yes!" she exclaimed. I smiled, opening the door and ushering Yuri in. She nearly sprinted in. Yuri and I both melted onto the couch with pleased exhales. It's been an exhausting day. I don't quite know when, but we both nodded off after a recap conversation of the day. I woke up about an hour later when the night completely swallowed us. I didn't wake Yuri. I quietly cooked dinner over the next half hour. When I actually finished dinner, I turned to the living room, and Yuri stood in the doorway.